Hi there. This year, I started to move away from exclusively using cell trays by incorporating soil blocking into my seed starting routine, and I wanted to give you a little update and kind of answer the question, at least from my point of view, is soil blocking worth it? In this video, I'm going to share with you some of the advantages and disadvantages I've found with soil blocking, and also a few tips and tricks that I learned this season. If you're new to this idea, it is, in essence, taking a dampened soil mixture of your choice and using a specialized tool called a soil blocker, compressing that soil into little cubes. It's an alternative to using cell trays or pots for starting your seedlings. There are a few different sizes of soil blockers. I started this year with a 2" by 2", and that worked great. Although I think next year I'll probably invest in one of the smaller ones, a 3/4 inch soil blocker, and I would use that exclusively for items like lettuces that can be transplanted out fairly quickly. First, let's talk advantages. One of the things that I found most amazing about this method is that it is super easy for watering. It's easy to tell when the blocks dry out, it's easy to tell when they're saturated, and once they do need watering, it's really easy just to drop the whole mesh tray into a solid tray and let the cubes absorb as much as they need. I also tried watering them from the top, just really gently dribbling water over the top, and that worked equally well. The blocks held up with both methods. Another advantage that is especially important at this time of year is that you have a longer grace period before you have to pot up your seedlings. The roots reach the edge of the soil blocks and essentially air prune themselves, and then as long as they have adequate nutrition, they just kind of hang out until you get a chance to put them into a larger situation. Right now I have lettuces in a cell tray, and there are already roots coming out of the bottom of the watering hole, which is not amazing. Those plants really need to get put into their final location, except for we are still having below average night temperatures, which means it's a little bit too cold to put them out at this point. All of this push and pull between the size of the plant and our outdoor temperatures could have been avoided if I had used soil blocks for the lettuces. So next year. Another big advantage is that when you are ready to transplant, you don't have to worry about transplant shock as much because you're just dropping the blocks into their next location instead of trying to dig a really delicate seedling out of a cell tray, either poking from the bottom or using a fork or a small spatula to try and get that little tiny plant out of a static location and potentially damaging the roots. Last, this method also uses less plastic. I expect this tool to last me for years, and therefore this method should be sustainable over time. This will not only translate to less waste every year as cell trays wear out, but also to a cost savings since I won't have to replace as much equipment every year. I am still using plastic mesh trays because they fit so beautifully into the 10-20 solid bottom trays for bottom watering, but I hope over the next couple of years to figure out a good plastic-free alternative for that. So if you have any suggestions or ideas, let me know. Now, onto some disadvantages. The first disadvantage that I found is that it takes a lot of effort to make soil blocks. With cell trays, you can just fill and go. Super straightforward, super easy. With soil blocks, there is more of a process, and it feels like it takes a lot more time. However, now that I think about it, I wouldn't be surprised if the net amount of time is the same if I actually tracked from beginning to end, from planting the seed to transplanting the seedling, because it does take time to make the soil blocks, but it takes also a long time to get the seedlings out of cell trays. So I would be willing to bet that if I actually tracked it accurately, it's probably a wash. Soil blocking is also messy. You have to be willing to get your hands dirty. If you're not in the mood for a sloppy project, you're not going to enjoy this at all. And even though the soil blocks are very easy to water, they do dry out more quickly. You have 5 to 6 exposed surfaces instead of just the top of the soil when you're using a cell tray. So they do need a lot more monitoring and a lot more care on the day-to-day. You really have to check them. Another challenge with soil blocking is real estate. Since I used a 2-inch by 2-inch soil blocker, I was only able to fit 32 to 36 blocks per tray versus the 50 to 72 cells I was able to use in the same amount of space by using a cell tray. So it effectively takes double the amount of space. I don't have a big enough greenhouse to play those kind of games. So next year I'm going to probably invest in a 3/4 inch soil blocker so that I can start things like lettuces, although then I'm going to have to be much more careful with my timing so that they can go out sooner with the spring weather. Overall, I would say that using soil blocks is a little bit more fussy than using cell trays. Once you get to the sowing the seeds phase, you do have to get the seeds in the little divots and then, pinch the tops closed. And it also makes multi-sowing much more difficult because even though you technically have more surface area than your cell trays in general, it's harder to get seeds in the right places. It's hard to spread your seeds out if you want to have more than one plant in each soil block. And here are a few tips that I learned this year. As I was researching methods for the mixture, I came across a whole bunch of different methods to getting the perfect soil block. Anywhere from plain potting soil all the way up to overly complicated recipes that had 15 or 16 different ingredients, including quite a few that I'd never even heard of. My local garden store, none of them carry stuff like green sand, and honestly, I don't even know what that is. I chose to keep it super simple and just kind of see what happens. So far, it's been working great. I just used my standard seed starting mix. I just used my standard seed starting mix, which is pretty much equal parts potting soil, cocoa coir, and perlite. The potting soil provides nutrition, the cocoa coir provides moisture retention and also structure, and then the perlite lightens things up a little bit. And as long as I compress the mixture sufficiently, I've had no problems at all. I also learned that the mixture needs to be much more wet than seems right. It needs to basically be a mud pie. And if you don't have enough liquid when you're making the soil blocks, you're not going to get the correct amount of compression and you're not going to have soil blocks that hold together. They're just going to crumble. A good measure for making sure you have enough moisture is that when you're making the soil blocks themselves, liquid should ooze out of the top of the soil blocker as you're compressing the blocks themselves. So, is soil blocking worth it? That's the big question. And I'm going to say unequivocally 100% yes. Even though there are quite a few downsides, for me personally, the advantages outweigh them hands down. I'm going to continue to use my cell trays until they fall apart, but moving forward, I hope not to replace them and move completely to soil blocking. It's more sustainable, my plants are happy, and I won't have to spend as much money on seed starting supplies every year. If you're new to soil blocking or seed starting and have any questions, or if you are a seasoned soil blocker and have suggestions, please let me know in the comments below. Until next time.